Hi, welcome to StatStuff. I'm Matt Hansen. In this lesson, I'll show you how we can take the final transfer function we built for a project and use that to springboard to a discussion on brainstorming and prioritizing solutions using the format of a workout. Now, we're not relying heavily on prerequisite lessons in this discussion, but it would help if you were familiar with the prior lessons on building the transfer function. But for now, let's talk about how we can identify the potential root causes using the transfer function.
Well, in a previous lesson we had talked about how to build the transfer function like the example that we're seeing below. So in this particular transfer function, what we want to look for is the one that has the factor that has the largest coefficient. Now the largest coefficient would suggest the factor would have the greatest weight or the greatest influence on the overall y because it has that multiplier in front of it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the root cause that's causing all the problems that created this project in the first place, but it could be a great place to start because it has such a large impact on the overall y. Now in this example that we have for the transfer function, metric b is the one that has the largest coefficient because it's a negative 16.26 versus metric E only has 0.5, something much smaller. So now we have other metrics that were also excluded. Those were the metrics D and metric C that we were looking at. So had they been included though, their coefficients would probably be a whole lot smaller than still this metric B. So it looks like we're at the right place and starting with metric B as a possible beginning point. Now what we probably want to do is run additional tests on metric B in this case in order to validate if it's the root cause, if necessary. So your team may have already validated that metric B is the root cause, but it is possible we may want to go back and run some additional tests. We can use the same kind of tests like on the voice of the process types of tests that we've done on the metric Y, the primary Y output, like we've done in the beginning of the measure phase when we're looking for process capability. Now those types of tests could be helpful to quantify how severely the root cause is being affected by the Y, and we could do a full process capability on it, but it usually isn't required. By this time the team would probably know that metric B or one of these metrics or key X's or factors that we're looking at is probably the right one to look at and to validate what they've already confirmed at this point or suspected at this point is the true root cause.
Now I have found that it can be extremely effective to brainstorm solutions with your team during an extended meeting like a workout.
Now, in my experience, brainstorming is most effective when you can do it within an extended meeting, kind of like in a workout. Now, depending on the complexity of the solutions that you're working with and the area that you're targeting with this opportunity, the meeting could last about 3 to 4 hours if you lead this workout. So it's not a very long thing like a typical workout that might last several days, but this portion for brainstorming might be a few hours. Now, the meeting could include the entire team, but also other SMEs, other subject matter experts that you want to be included as part of this who have a good understanding and can help in the brainstorming process. Now, the champion and sponsor don't have to be a part of the entire meeting. In some instances, I think it's best to exclude them because they might stifle some of the brainstorming or some of the interaction that you might get among the team members. But if you are going to have a sponsor champion be part of it, an ideal place for them to be a part of it will be to be in the beginning where they're going to kick off the meeting and also maybe leave and then come back at the end where you can review the results and some of those solutions that you've brainstormed together with them. So as an example agenda for if we're going to brainstorm these kinds of things through a workout, here's the several steps that you can follow for that and some recommended durations that you might see if you're going to try to execute this within about a 3 to 4 hour time frame. So again, I would recommend starting off with the champion or the sponsor helping to kick it off. This is a way for validating the initial problem you're trying to solve and how necessary it is for a solution. It might only take about 15 minutes. After that, I would review again why you're even there and the things that led up to this point, which is just simply reviewing the transfer function and validating again the root cause that you're trying to solve. That shouldn't take very long, again maybe up to 15 minutes. Then try to notate all possible solutions or potential solutions they may come up with that could help fix that root cause. And this might take 30 to 60 minutes to work together and notating every possibility, all centered again around that root cause. Fourth step would be to build an infinity diagram of those proposed solutions. That may only take about 15 to 30 minutes in order to build that diagram. And then from that information, I would try to build an impact matrix or like a pick chart that would help map those proposed solutions they've come up with. And that might take about 30 to 60 minutes to work through. The sixth step would be to select the proposed solutions and build a plan for any necessary research of how you're going to work through to take the actions and necessary steps to implement those solutions. That might take about 30 minutes to do that. and then have the champion and sponsor come back for another review and get their buy-in to make sure they agree with the solutions that were identified and those necessary steps to let those actions be implemented. Now this is again at a high level for the general flow you might follow through this type of workout when you're trying to work through with your team to brainstorm possible solutions. Now for some of these, I identified a few things that we haven't gone over yet. So items 3 through 6 of these steps that are listed on here are going to be reviewed in separate lessons.
Rather than go into many details here, I have separate lessons that will cover the steps here on how to build the affinity diagram and impact matrix. So for now, let's skip those and dive into what we should consider when wrapping up the workout.
Well, by the end of the workout, you should have several things. First of all, you should have a prioritized list of the primary improvements that are going to fix the root cause. You should also have a prioritized list of the secondary improvements that will help fix the root cause. Now, the agreement you should also have by the team as well as the champion and the sponsor on all these improvements that you've identified that you want to implement. Also, you should have a list of actions with all the necessary owners and due dates associated with those actions, or any additional research that might be necessary for these improvements. So why have we not talked about building a pilot plan as part of this workout exercise? Well, at this point, we haven't really confirmed that the improvements are really the right improvements. So we're still making a presumption here that they're the right things to do. So if there are any other stakeholders that could be affected by these improvements, we need to make sure we inform them and get them bought into these improvements we've identified. As well, there could be a risk, and this is where a risk assessment like an FMEA can help us ensure that there aren't any other adverse repercussions by the improvements that we haven't accounted for yet at this point during the workout. So this is something the team needs to have a break apart from the workout and before we actually dive into the pilot plan to make sure we assess that kind of thing, because they may need some additional time to digest the results from the workout and maybe come up with other issues that they may not have fully addressed as part of the brainstorming exercise. So when is it going to be appropriate for us to begin this pilot plan? Well, everyone may want to jump right in and building the pilot plan, but again, I would recommend that you at least wait until you can answer a few things. First of all, do all the stakeholders who are going to be affected by the improvements, do they agree with these improvements? Are they bought in? And are all the potentially critical risks identified with a plan for mitigating those risks? This is where the FMEA tool is going to be a helpful tool where we can do a risk assessment. That we're going to cover that in a separate lesson, but that's the type of tool that will help us in understanding what those risks are and where we can build a plan for trying to mitigate those risks. So if the improvements are not very complex though, and they all fall within the complete control of the champion or sponsor for this exercise, then maybe it's okay to skip the whole risk assessment and go ahead and build the pilot plan. But it's not always the case, so it's good to at least have a separation of time between building a pilot plan and brainstorming those solutions to make sure we've accounted for and acquired all the relationship and sponsorship that we need from those stakeholders, and also gone through that risk assessment as needed.
All right, before we close this lesson, let's discuss how we can apply some of these concepts in a practical way.
I'd like you to try to identify at least 2 other projects or initiatives that you might have worked on as part of your organization and ask yourself a few questions. First of all, how are the solutions identified for those particular projects? And what method was used to identify and validate the root causes that were being resolved within each project? And how are the solutions tied to a root cause? For example, to ensure that they were actually going to resolve the original root problem that you were trying to attack within the project in the first place. And how involved was the team in the process for trying to identify and prioritize those potential solutions? So if neither the team nor the stakeholders were very involved, then how did that affect the overall outcome for each one of those? And also, what could have been done differently in order to improve several things, such as to improve the speed at which the solutions were implemented? Or what could have been done differently to improve the buy-in from the team and other critical stakeholders? Or to improve the cost for implementation, such as in terms of time, equipment, people, or resources, or that sort of thing? Or to improve the final outcome of the implemented solutions?
Well, that wraps up this lesson. Check out StatStuff.com for many more resources that can help you achieve powerful results. I'm Matt Hansen. Thanks for watching.